Before we get into the presentation, I need to mention a few housekeeping items everyone I'm sure very familiar with at this point. But first, as I mentioned, we are recording, and that recording will be available on our YouTube, and I will also send it out a little bit later this month. Please feel free to share the recording with your network. We'd love to get this information out, and we'd love to have all of you share it. Because we are recording, we are going to be keeping everybody on mute, including for the Q&A. So you'll see in this slide how to use the chat if you are not familiar with Google Meet software. That's how we're going to be conducting the Q&A. We'll formally begin it at about 9:15 or maybe a bit before, but feel free to type your questions into the chat before then. We will randomly be drawing the name of somebody who asks a question to win a cool outdoorsy prize, so keep that in mind. That's it for my housekeeping. I'm going to introduce today's moderator, Cassidy Jones. Cassidy is a national park advocate, former park ranger, and dark skies enthusiast who's born and raised in Wasatch County. She first got involved with dark skies as a park ranger at Timpanogos Cave National Monument, where she learned the value of the dark skies both inside the cave and out about in the night. She now works in the nonprofit sector for the National Parks Conservation Association, where she connects people to the civic process of keeping parks and the skies above them protected. Cassidy, thank you so much for moderating.
Thanks, India. We really appreciate you and the Office of Outdoor Recreation for creating this opportunity to connect and to share. And good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you. I'm pleased to begin by introducing 3 Utah-based experts on dark skies, Crystal White, Flint Timmons, and Aubrey Larson, and we'll hear a lot more from them today. But first off, Crystal White is the owner of Moab Astronomy Tours. She was recently selected as a NASA Solar System Ambassador, volunteering with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and receives intense training from the scientists and engineers throughout NASA's network of centers. Her true passion in life lies in conserving our view of the universe and keeping the night sky clear for everyone to draw inspiration and enjoyment from. She works toward this goal with the International Dark Sky Association, the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative, Friends of Arches and Canyonland Parks, and Moab Dark Skies. Welcome, Crystal. Next up, we have Flint Timmons. Flint is a destination development specialist with the Utah Office of Tourism, where he assists local governments to develop the amenities, infrastructure, and leadership necessary to become welcoming destinations for visitors. He previously worked for the state's Division of Housing and Community Development, where he conducted rural research, provided local government planning assistance, and supported the division's infrastructure funding programs. Flint graduated with a master's degree in public administration from the Romney Institute of Public Management at Brigham Young University. Thanks for being here, Flint. And finally, Aubrey Larson, who works to improve the human experience through quality design, clear communication, and data-driven planning and decision-making in her position with the Utah Community Development Office. In addition to her work with the state, Aubrey provides support for landscape-scale dark sky conservation efforts throughout the Four Corners regions as the coordinator for the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative. Aubrey graduated from Utah State University with a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture and environmental planning and a master's degree in bioregional planning. It's good to have you, Aubrey. All right, now we're going to roll into about 20 minutes of panelist conversation to lay a foundation on astro-tourism, economics, and dark sky-friendly community efforts. Then at about 9 o'clock, 9:15, we'll turn to questions from you all in the audience, so be sure to submit them in the chat as India instructed. So first off, I'd like to turn to Aubrey. Aubrey, could you tell us just what we mean by dark skies and why Utah and the Colorado Plateau region are significant in these efforts?
Absolutely. Thanks, Cassidy. And while we're pulling up the slideshow, I'm just amazed that there's so many people jumping on a webinar at 8:30 in the morning. You are all very committed. So before I get into Cassidy's incredible question, I just want to reintroduce myself. Again, my name is Aubrey Larson. I work for the state's Community Development Office, and our mission is to help Utah's rural communities build knowledge, skills, and abilities to reach their goals. And part of that work that I get to do is supporting landscape scale night sky conservation as coordinator for the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative. And the whole reason that I got involved with the cooperative was because a community approached us with the goal of preserving and protecting their dark skies. And that led me into a lot of research and asking questions and kind of diving into this ocean of information and getting to know a lot of incredible advocates. And I think it's significant to note that there are a lot of different reasons that a community might be interested in dark sky conservation. Today, we're just focusing on those economic reasons, which can include energy savings, increased property values, and then we're going to talk more about astronomy-based tourism and recreation in just a minute. I want to start with a very short story, and I'm sure it's one that many of you have heard before. But in 1994, I was 5, so I don't remember this event, but there was an earthquake just outside of Los Angeles, and it knocked the power out. And these emergency centers received multiple calls from people who were all panicked and concerned about what they described as this giant silvery cloud in the sky. And I'm sure you know exactly what they were describing. It was the Milky Way, something that many of these folks had never seen before, and it was cause for concern, unfortunately. A common statistic that we share is that about 80% of the world's population lives under light-polluted skies and can no longer see the Milky Way from where they live. And much of this light pollution, which I'll give a more concrete definition in just a moment, we know is concentrated in more populated areas such as Los Angeles. But there are also regions such as where we live here in the Intermountain West that still have relatively dark skies and opportunities to benefit from the conservation of those dark skies. So this next slide I want to show is a bunch of different screen grabs of headlines. The point being that light pollution is a global conversation. It's on a lot of people's minds. It's not something new. It's something that is being studied. We are definitely learning more about the impacts of light pollution every day. And I just wanted to point out one of these headlines there in the center. This is from the International Dark Sky Association, or IDA's blog. And it says 5 years of satellite images show global light pollution increasing at a rate of 2% per year. So we know this is something that is increasing. And rather than focus on the negative, I like to flip it and think, okay, this is an opportunity to just put some policies, best practices in place that can help mitigate light pollution. And the definition that I really like for light pollution, which I stole from John Barentine from the IDA, is that light pollution is any sort of adverse or unintended effect of the use of artificial light at night. And that usually looks like excessive or inappropriately used lighting. So now I want to go into kind of some scaled perspectives of light pollution. I love maps. This next slide is of the globe and showcases global light pollution. If you've never seen a light pollution map, the scale is pretty simple to interpret. Darker gray representing a pristine night sky, up until red, Milky Way lost, up to white, which would be the most severe. And you can see that these more developed parts of the world have more light pollution. So now I want to zoom into North America, and you can see a pretty distinct line down the middle there between the west and east regions of the US. There are still pockets of natural dark skies remaining, and a lot of those dark skies are in the western US, which is significant to our conversation today. This next map, I've highlighted Utah there in the middle, as well as the boundary for the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. Here in Utah, you can see that a lot of our light pollution is concentrated along the Wasatch Front, spilling into the Uinta Basin a little bit, and then down in the Washington County, St. George area. This is not to say that urban areas cannot benefit from light pollution mitigation or protecting their dark skies, but it is to show that there are areas that probably have a greater advantage. And a lot of these locations are public lands, parks, and communities in this region. If you've never heard of,
I can't see your slides. Can other people see your slides?
good question. I don't know. Can people see them? We've got a yes. We've got some thumbs up. I apologize if you can't see them. I'll try and be more descriptive with my language. So what I have here is an outline of Utah, and then the Colorado Plateau is also shown as kind of a fat dashed line. This is the Four Corners region, so it incorporates parts of Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado. And this cooperative was the first in the nation. It was established about 2013 by the National Park Service with the goal of celebrating our night skies, of mitigating light pollution, of landscape scale conservation, and bringing together a bunch of different entities with this voluntary initiative to work together to protect our dark skies. So I wanted to talk just a moment about the International Dark Sky Places program. So for those of you who may not be able to see, I have a map on the right of Utah showcasing our certified dark sky places. And as I mentioned, there is a nonprofit called the International Dark Sky Association that has this program. I believe it began in 2001. And the aim for this program is to encourage parks and communities to adopt lighting best practices, to have a strategy for protecting their night skies, to be proactive. And if they follow certain certification guidelines, they can become a certified dark sky place. And Utah is a global leader with this certification. You can see here on this map, the yellow are communities and everything else would be a state national park or national monument. Utah has 2 dark sky communities currently. I know there's others in that accreditation process, as well as 16 parks. Pretty cool, and more on the way. This program is awesome. It's not prerequisite for having dark skies or having benefits from those economic reasons or goals for protecting night skies, but it definitely helps. It brings international recognition and also encourages folks to have a plan or policy in place. So last of all, before I pass the torch back to Cassidy and on to Flint, I wanted to talk a little bit about the secret sauce for these prime dark skies in this region. So I have 10 ingredients here, and I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. First off, high elevations. The highest point in the Colorado Plateau region is 12,600 feet above sea level. We know that there's less turbulence in these higher elevations, which contributes to greater visibility of the sky. These are pretty dry states. There's low levels of precipitation, averaging about 8 inches per year. If it's rainy, you're probably going to see less stars. Number of cloudless days. These are 4 of the sunniest states in the nation, again, contributing to clear visibility. Clean, unpolluted air. Again, smog probably is not going to be helpful if you're trying to see the stars. Low population densities. Generally, more people means more light pollution. Dramatic landscapes. Worldwide visibility and destinations. High concentration of both state and national parks. A large amount of public lands. About 60% of this region is public lands. And then I added this ingredient the other day because I think the physical characteristics are important, but also there's cultural characteristics that contribute. And there are incredible proactive people, places, and policies working to preserve the dark skies in this region for a lot of different reasons. So I'm going to turn it back over to Cassidy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Aubrey. Per usual, your map making and graphics are just absolutely stunning. We've got some props for you in the chat. And those folks who aren't able to see the images, I think India is working on making sure that you get connected correctly. So thank you, Aubrey, for that fantastic foundation. Now we're going to move over to Flint to start talking a little bit more about astro-tourism and the economic impacts of the industry. And Flint, as you kind of share what you've prepared for us today, there has been a question in the chat related to this about the 2015 Missouri State University research on economic development in the Colorado Plateau, kind of what that research is, kind of the status of that research, if it had been withdrawn. You're welcome to offer some thoughts if you know anything about that, or I'll invite other panelists to speak on that point after you kind of wrap up your section. So take it away, Flint.
All right, thank you, Cassidy. Yeah, so as Aubrey mentioned, dark skies, true dark skies where we can, be unobstructed from light pollution are increasingly a rarity in the world and in the United States. This idea that, or this statistic that 80% of the population, the world's population, and that holds true in North America as well, can't see it from their home. And, when you think about it, for most of human history, that was pretty inconceivable, but it's a daily reality for us now. And so pockets like the Colorado Plateau in our various dark sky protected areas in Utah are a rarity. They are something that people aren't familiar with, and it's something that will really be exciting to those people who, haven't been able to see that. So astrotourism, if we could go to the next slide, India. Astrotourism is broadly defined as any kind of tourism that involves the night sky or visiting facilities related to astronomy. And I think more specifically, we can think of astrotourism as people who travel specifically for that purpose. But astrotourism, at its broadest, can be a great value-added product to any, typical service that tourism or leisure or hospitality business can offer. And there are so many ways that we can incorporate astrotourism, and a lot of reasons why, and not just economic. Somebody mentioned in the chat asking about the study from Missouri State University that there was a brief that came out in 2015. They released the full economic study in earlier this year, it was early 2020, describing the economic impacts of astrotourism and dark skies on the Colorado Plateau. So if we go to this next slide, we can see some of the main results from that study, and I think we could probably drop that into the chat. So astrotourism from this study is estimated to generate over $5.8 billion over the next 10 years. So as we can see, this really speaks to the rarity of what the astrotourism product is and what people are willing to do in order to see it. A lot of this comes from visitation to dark sky protected places in the national park system and in the state park system. But there's no reason why the economic benefits can't also extend to non-NPS or state park systems units. It can extend to each of our individual businesses and services and communities. The dark skies and astrotourism are expected to directly or indirectly support 10,000 jobs annually for the next 10 years, for a total of 113,000 jobs is what this study reported. So we can see again that there's quite a bit of opportunity for astrotourism. This is going to be a growing segment of our visitor population and demographics. And so the more we can offer and cater to this, I think the better off we'll be here in Utah. Specifically in our next slide, we can see just some of the differences there. One of the biggest benefits of dark sky and astrotourism is that you have to stay overnight, and lodging is really where the greatest visitor spending comes into play. And that is also, when it comes to tourism, where most of our tax revenue comes from. That goes into our communities and back into our local infrastructure and services. So the study reported using NPS data, National Park System data, that a day tripper to a national parks unit typically will spend $90 per day per party. So everybody in their family spend $90 a day collectively. When they stay at non-NPS lodging, a hotel in a gateway community, for example, that jumps up to $270. And when they stay on NPS lodging within a park unit, that jumps up to 390. So we can really see dramatically the difference in visitor spending, and that money goes right back into our communities. And there's a lot of opportunities for us to incorporate astro-tourism into our services. A couple businesses I would like to highlight are the Dark Sky RV campground that opened up recently outside of Kanab. This is an RV campground that you may expect to find anywhere, but they have dark sky compliant lighting and really try to preserve that dark sky, and really provides a unique opportunity that sets them apart from other RV parks. There's the Compass Rose Lodge just up in Ogden Valley that is a hotel, a small bed and breakfast type hotel that also has an observatory built in, and they offer lots of dark sky services, viewings through their telescope and star parties and other services. And think about how differentiating that is from other type of lodging opportunities, and how exciting that might be to a visitor who has never seen the night skies before.
All right, fantastic, Flint. Thank you so much for that kind of excellent overview of the economics of astrotourism, really focusing in on some places here in Utah. We've got folks on the call from kind of all over the place, and I'm really proud that we're highlighting Utah here and some really exciting things that are happening here. I think that foundation is a perfect transition to Crystal, who can offer some insights, we hope, on entrepreneurial opportunities in astrotourism. So Crystal, could you just share some observations and personal experiences with us from your business in Moab, please?
Sure, absolutely. As the tours, I have guests from all over the world that come and seek out a tour to go out underneath the night sky here in Moab. And these are, everyone from families to couples to solo travelers to astrophotographers to even retired astronomers I've had on my tour. And really, they want to experience the night sky in such a dark area. And most of them just are unfamiliar with the landscape. They don't know where the best sites are. They don't know what the hidden dangers might be at night. So having a guide to show them where to go and how to experience the night sky safely is huge and very appreciated. And I'm also noticing in Moab specifically, we have pretty much any multi-day trip that you book, whether it's a river trip, a mountain bike trip, or just a backcountry trip by vehicle, that's where you have an overnight stay. A lot of the tour companies are adding some element of night sky interpretation, which is incredible. And it's even gotten so popular here that our local Science Moab is now training local guides on science that's happening in Moab and ways to reduce impact for people that come to visit the area. And part of that is including night sky preservation, which is huge. So that message is going to get out there to worldwide travelers. Yeah, that's it. Oh, I forgot to ask India to advance slides. Sorry. So here you can see some telescope viewing. This is a lovely family that I had out of my tour. And a lovely Betty Maya Foote photograph, who I know is here today. Oh, this is the next one.
Fantastic. Beautiful photos of Moab. Always so good to see some of those, even if they're quick. Thank you so much, Crystal. And, we wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about dark skies, astrotourism, but the other, promise that we made in the session today was to talk about communities specifically. And so I'm hoping that Flint and Crystal can chat a little bit about what communities and businesses should know as they consider promoting dark sky assets and focusing on astrotourism. I think that'll be really interesting for the group assembled here from all over the world. So So, Flint, let's begin with you, and then we'll hear from Crystal after that.
Sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tori. And, you know, we wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about dark skies, astrotourism, but the other, like promise that we made in the session today was to talk about communities and businesses should know as they consider promoting dark sky assets and focusing on astrotourism. I think that'll be really interesting for the group assembled here from all over the world. So Flint, let's begin with you, and then we'll hear from Crystal after that.
Yeah, Crystal just provided some really great examples of how astro-tourism can be a dedicated business model or can add value to existing business models. You know, there's so many different types of people who could benefit from and be interested in dark skies and astro-tourism programming. And so there really is a lot of variety available. One of the simplest things is to incorporate dark sky compliant lighting in your property. So those are having shielded lights, lights that are on a certain color spectrum, lights that you know, are only on when needed to reduce that sky glow. And I think that's one of the most important things, is to really practice what we preach. If we're offering, you know, that we are a dark sky business, or that we are dark sky friendly, or we incorporate it into our business model, we sort of need to back that up with the actual practices. And you know, astro-tourism and dark skies are really easy to incorporate because we have this great public asset up in the sky. And so by reducing the light pollution that we give off, we are, you know, we have immediate access to this great resource. The way Crystal described, you know, people learning about the dark skies and incorporating that interpretation into their services is huge. Even learning a little bit about the science of astronomy, learning legends and stories about the night sky, you know, from, you know, the stories of the zodiac and the constellations, or maybe there are local legends and stories from your local history or family history. Those are really great. You know, people really use those stories to connect. And there are so many other ways. The state park system and national park system here in Utah do a fantastic job of providing opportunities for people to get together and look at the park, look at the night skies. There's this saying that half the park is after dark in a lot of our national park system, because, you know, it really is a new experience, and there are dark sky parties and guided hikes that can be done to really connect with the dark skies at night. There are so many other things too. You know, we can do guided tours, whether that is kayaking or hiking, you know, on a full moon. There are lots of opportunities to experience wildlife at dark, you know, hunting scorpions with black lights, or looking at bats. You know, that's a really popular activity in some areas. And so there are lots of really different, simple ways to incorporate that. But I think one of the most important things, like I said, is to really back up what you're saying and advertising, and let people know that you're available and that you're committed to the dark skies.
Excellent. Crystal, any thoughts from you about communities specifically? And then I know that Aubrey's got a couple of thoughts as well.
Yeah, as far as, you know, any community that's interested in promoting their night skies for astro-tourism, India, I'll probably go through these pretty quick, so you're welcome to just kind of keep going. First, you got to make sure that you know, that you want to promote your night sky for tourism, and that you have community buy-in. That's kind of crucial, because you have to have their buy-in. And then you need to figure out what areas of your landscape are best for this. Which areas are sensitive to impact from recreation use. Yeah, and then do you have the infrastructure to support added overnight tourism? So do you have grocery stores? Do you have supplies? Do you have lodging? Do you have restaurants? And then does your community have other economic drivers? Because if you rely on tourism alone, as we learned in Moab, it's really brutal if something like coronavirus happens. And then how do you best reach your potential tourists? And then how do you preserve that night sky resource so that you don't lose what everyone's coming to see? Yeah, those are pretty much the 7 tips I would have for anyone considering on touting their night skies for astro-tourism.
Excellent. Thank you, Crystal and Flint. Aubrey, I'm curious to know if you have anything you'd like to add before we go into the open Q&A. We've got a lot of interest in sort of specific community advice, which I know we'll cover towards the end, but anything else to offer right at this moment?
Yeah, I just have some awesome examples from 5 different community leaders that I just want to share their own words. I think it was Reading Rainbow. LeVar Burton would say, you don't have to take my word for it. These are the experts about dark skies in their places where they live, and it's highlighting some from Utah and other locations. So this first one is advice from Helper Utah, Utah's 2nd certified dark sky community. The advice is build broad-based community support in addressing light pollution. Education is key as people generally associate dark with unsafe spaces. So building that support, educating folks about what we're talking about, helping them understand what we're referring to when we say dark skies, that it doesn't mean complete darkness, but using light appropriately at night. Next example is Ivans, Utah, down by St. George. Their advice is get started now. Outdoor LED lighting will be the norm if it isn't already in your community. There are great positives associated with LEDs, but there are problems as well. Fortunately, the problems can be corrected with a good, up-to-date outdoor lighting ordinance. We are happy to share our experiences and materials with other communities. And if you'd like to get in touch with Ivans, please let me know. I'll get you connected with them. They're fantastic. Next, I have an example from Tori, and I think I saw some Tori folks on the call today. This advice is fantastic. Be open and clear about how an outdoor lighting ordinance would affect residents and businesses, since they are the folks who will feel any possible future changes. Be certain people understand that a lighting ordinance does not mean no lights. Instead, it means the right light at the right time in the right place and pointing down. So yeah, be open and clear. So now we're leaving Utah. This is an example from Colorado. These communities are West Cliff and Silver Cliff. And their advice is that sometimes you have to take the long approach. We worked for 15 years to build a strong public support network so that the trustees and council members knew we had public support and that passing an ordinance would not create a public backlash. We went from being regarded as tree huggers to protectors of the rural environment. That's quite a switch in thinking. So sometimes it takes time. 15 years is quite a long time, but patience pays off. My last is from Northern Arizona, and I think this is my favorite advice. It's from the Kaibab Paiute Reservation, and I'll read this quickly. Paiutes have a saying, one person speaks, one person listens. Many people speak, many people listen. So in other words, one person cannot do it alone. It will take many people to help spread the word about the importance of dark sky conservation. So find your support system, talk to different people. There's lots of different programs, experts that can be supportive. I think it demonstrates all the people on this call. There's a lot of passionate folks that can help with this goal of protecting the night skies and seeing those benefits. Thanks, Cassidy.
Thank you, Aubrey. And we're now going to move into our open kind of Q&A. As a reminder, I'll ask that you submit those questions in the chat or the Q&A function in written form, and I'll go ahead and read those out. We've got about 15 minutes for this. Thanks so much for those of you who've been putting questions in already. And one of the first ones I think is really appropriate for Aubrey, because we've got somebody who's just generally looking for some resources and some help redoing landscaping and lighting and thinking about planning to promote dark sky, kind of a friendly community sort of space in a building and business. And Justina's already put a few helpful resources in the chat, which is great. But Aubrey, do you just want to give a couple quick words about resources that are available to folks for planning and where they might find them?
Sure, and thanks, Justina. Use Justina's resources, they're fantastic. But a couple that I'm familiar with, there is a dark sky planning guide that I helped to create. It's available at cpdarkskies.org. If you look in our toolkit, that's the Colorado Plateau's website. That gives a great overview of things to think about if you want to plan to protect your dark skies, because we know if we plan, we're more likely to be successful. So yeah, check out the Cooperatives Toolkit. We've done our best to put a lot of resources specifically for communities in that toolbox. And of course, the International Dark Sky Association has other fantastic resources. National and state parks have a lot of different things available. And then, like Ivan said, reach out to communities that have done this. I don't think we have to recreate the wheel. There's lots of great advice and case studies out there. So yeah, great question.
Excellent advice. I've got another question here that seems pretty good for Flint or Crystal. So in your experience, what's sort of the biggest draw for night skies tourism? Is it tours on just any random night, or a new and full moon at specific astronomical events like meteor showers? They're talking about how Flint mentioned wildlife and things like that you can find at night. So in your experience, just what's the biggest draw?
Well, there's still a lot of research to be done on specific astro-tourism. I think this is sort of an emerging field that we're seeing as a specific trend or unique segment in astro or in our visitor demographics. But so we don't have the data, sort of lags right now. But what we do see is that it trends really well with national and state park visitation. Obviously, these are dark sky places on public lands out here, and so the more people that we see experiencing our public lands also have the opportunity to experience dark skies. And so what we see is that dark skies and astrotourism are really a value-added component. There are people who will travel specifically to see dark skies, specifically here in Utah. But I think for a lot of folks, it's really an opportunity on top of something they're already planning to do. They come to visit arches during the day, and then there's that opportunity to help share the area with them at night. And if we can reach them before they do their planning, or as they're doing their planning before they arrive on site, we can encourage them to stay overnight and participate in dark sky programming. And then obviously, whenever there are astronomical events, those are going to be huge. The solar eclipse from a few years ago is probably our best example of astrotourism. Especially places that were in the path of totality, they saw huge numbers of visitation, and some of our small rural towns were overwhelmed in Wyoming and Idaho of people who wanted to go see that. And so when we have other events such as meteor showers, or whenever there's something of note, the Neowise comet is another great example. People will hear about it and will want to come and see it, and so those are really great opportunities to take advantage of that. But on the daily, there's also ways to create that value add and capture some people who may not have it on their radar.
Great. Crystal, any thoughts about sort of in your personal experience what the biggest draw is?
Well, we haven't really dabbled in the hikes yet, but that's something we're working on, because full moon's a really difficult time to stargaze. But really, honestly, usually what it is people are just unfamiliar with the science in the sky, and they just want someone to teach them, to talk to them and have an open conversation about like what's happening up there, like what are they seeing, what's the reality of what's going on. Like, what is a shooting star? Is it really a star falling out of the sky? No, it's not. It's a piece of dust glancing off the atmosphere. So it's things like that. They just really want to be connected with something beyond Earth.
That's lovely. Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate your expertise working with folks all the time on dark sky tourism. I'm going to shift now to kind of a different grouping of questions. We've got a few people in the chat who've been interested in just talking a little bit more about how astrotourism is adapting in COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm curious to know if you could talk a bit about programming that you've been doing, or a programming that you've seen that's been really successful. There's a little bit of interest in programming beyond kind of videos and Zoom or social media, if you have any insights, and just how folks are adapting at this time would be great.
Sure, I can speak to my own experience. When this pandemic first started, we had to kind of pause and really think it over, because we didn't know how it was spreading. We didn't know whether it was contact with surfaces or whether it was airborne. And so until the research kind of clarified that, I actually reduced my tours down to groups that were traveling together alone. So they all knew each other and were already interacting. And then I just made sure they masked up for my safety. And so everybody was required to wear masks at all times, just set. And, you know, as far as my tours versus parks, you know, it's very different. I have very small groups, you know, no more than 15 people. And when you advertise something like this at a park, it's all of a sudden you have 200 people that want to be there. So if you're willing to limit how many people attend and make sure that there's a mask requirement, and you've really got to check people, like make sure they're wearing their masks properly. So I usually just say that in my introduction. This is how you wear your nose, it's below your chin, and it's on at all times. And that seems to get the point across. And there's only a few times I've had to ask people to readjust their masks for me. But I have no problem asking that for the safety of everybody involved. But then as COVID matured and we found out, you know, it's not so much surfaces, it's airborne. Well, that was an easy fix. Everybody wear a mask all the time. And then every time I would get an object in view, I would back away from the telescope, let them take a look. And so I just limited how close I was to people versus how close, you know, I used to stand. So it's really just adjusting behavior and trying to be mindful of everybody's safety. And so all the groups, the different groups now, they're separated by 6 feet. I ask them to stay seated until it's their group's turn. So it has slowed the process down a little bit, but everybody adjusts pretty quickly. We're, you know, as humans, we adapt fast, and they just appreciate being able to get out into the night sky.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Crystal. You're certainly the expert in this on this group, so I really appreciate it. Aubrey, I'd like to direct the next question to you, which is just about the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative and how it would benefit other kind of communities or regions to create something similar. So who makes up the cooperative? How did it start? Give us a little insight into that story, please.
Sure, and that's a great question, and it's one that I've kind of had to learn the full story over the years. It's really interesting. And I do want to say there is a second dark sky cooperative called the Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative just to the west of the Colorado Plateau. And they've taken lessons learned from us, but they've also, they understand who lives in their region. It's a different, there's different states, there's different locations, and they've taken what we've learned and adapted it. So I think that's an important part. If you want to create your own dark sky cooperative, recognizing what makes your region special and specific, I think the cooperative's mission is specific to this region. So what's your region like? What are your goals? And this, the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative was part of the National Park Service Call to Action Starry Starry Night in 2013. I am the third coordinator. Betty Maya Foote, who's on this call, was the second coordinator, and I think we've each brought a slightly different flavor to the work being done. And since I do work for the state of Utah in the Community Development Office, I've brought more of a community focus. So depending on who's trying to lead the charge, who's helping coordinate things, there will be different focus areas. And really what you need is a support group. You can definitely lean on what's already been done. I've definitely borrowed information from the IDA, from National State Parks, learning from them. And I think this ties into something Crystal mentioned, but thinking comprehensively. We're focused on economics today. We're talking about dark skies, but how does that fit into the bigger picture? How does that make sense from a regional planning perspective or down to the local level? What are your community development goals and how does this fit into those long term? Hopefully that answered that question. I can send more info if you want to learn more. It's an interesting story.
That's great, Aubrey. Thank you. And yes, you're right. We're kind of in this region. We're pretty lucky that there's a few cooperatives functioning like that. It'd be great to see more in different parts of the country. We have a few folks who are interested in talking about funding, of course. So I'm going to offer kind of 3 different ways folks are interested in funding, and I encourage the panel to just pop in anything that they know or sort of some kind of sweeping advice. So folks are interested in kind of funding for inventorying light pollution and retrofitting structures and thinking about how that might apply to youth conservation core efforts and those efforts getting into this kind of work. The second one is about wildlife impacts and benefits of reduced light pollution in urban areas and funding therein. And then the last one is about just general funding resources to upgrade specific town lighting to be night sky friendly. So any advice would be much appreciated by the group.
Aubrey, do you want to talk about Tori? I'll just put you on the spot.
I think there's some Tori people on the call who'd probably be better than myself. What aspect of the question do you think Tori fits best, Crystal?
We're getting funding from Garcane. Well, I can speak just real quick about Moab. Like, we were able to work with Rocky Mountain Power here in Moab and can, get them in line with what we needed for a dark sky friendly streetlight. And they were able to find it. Their engineers were able to acquire it. And so now every streetlight that's getting replaced is getting replaced with night sky friendly lighting. And the city is paying a portion of that, but I think Rocky Mountain is also paying a portion.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of our electric utilities, so whether those are the big companies like Rocky Mountain or smaller co-ops, can have some incentives or rebates for dark sky compliant lighting because it is an energy saver for them and for the customer as well. And that's one of the other side benefits of dark skies preservation is it saves us money in terms of lighting. So a lot of these utilities will have incentives and offers to help out. Something else is that it doesn't all have to be done at once. Just as you typically replace lighting, you can swap it out for improved fixtures or bulbs in some really easy ways. We're adding timers to outside lighting. So just through your normal, maintenance, you can incorporate dark skies lighting. Many communities will implement dark sky compliant lighting code. So as part of their business or as part of their building code. So dictating what types of lighting can be put into new construction.
And I can just talk a little bit more about Tori. I know they had a fantastic experience working with Garcane. And my understanding was they did some crowd-sourced funding to get that initial money they needed to switch out their lighting, but Garcane came and helped install that for free. Tori folks, correct me if I'm wrong. So talk to your power company. I've heard nothing but good things about working with them and asking questions. They're very flexible and willing to be supportive. And like Flint said, it in the long run will help save them money as well. I also know down in Kanab, they got a little creative, and this ties into the Outdoor Recreation Office. I believe there was a grant opportunity to create programming around nature-based activities for children, and they incorporated that into astronomy in their local effort to establish this Stellar Vista Observatory. So be creative, look into funding sources both at the state and federal level. There's also the Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program through NPS. They're fabulous, and they will come in and help your community if you have a planning project trying to figure out how to incorporate dark skies. Yeah, there's just lots of ways you can be creative. I wish there were more funding sources. This is a common question. I wish there was just this magical grant I could give people. Maybe someday, but for now, just keep your eyes and ears open. There's lots of ways you can be creative.
And I think, again, one of the benefits of it is that it's flexible and it can be incorporated into other types of grant requests. So usually this is fairly inexpensive, and so it's usually not too much of a burden to add it to other grants or funding requests to incorporate dark sky compliance.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. I'd like to just ask one final question. I'm going to kind of merge a couple questions together here that I think generally relate to just innovative partnerships for astro-tourism. One has to do with curious to know if anyone knows about connections or partnerships between hiking clubs and astronomy clubs. That's sort of the first question. And then the second one has to do with any programming that y'all are aware of that does archaeoastronomy. Go for it.
Well, I think our state park system is a fantastic example of how local enthusiast clubs, astronomy clubs, can really be instrumental in astro-tourism. I know that many of our state parks will partner with local astronomy clubs to host and operate their dark sky parties. And there's no reason why partnerships like that can't be expanded, especially with some of our more public-funded institutions. If there are, between the colleges and observatories, the nonprofits that can partner with these enthusiasts and local experts to host some of these new events. And so I would say, if you're in a business that might be interested in astronomy, reach out to these local experts and see, what sort of opportunities might exist with your state or national park units or with the local astronomy club. How can we work together and create new opportunities?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I definitely agree with Flint. Working with local astronomy clubs is often kind of the seed for how these programs get going and become really successful. Thanks so much to everyone for their excellent questions. I did my best to keep up, but if you've got other burning things, I'm sure the panelists would be happy to answer. And India is going to share around a bunch of resources that are really well curated, particularly by Aubrey. So definitely check out those resources. And to close us out today, I want to spend a little bit of time just asking the panelists one more question, which is to share a piece of advice about how all the attendees on today's call can work to protect the night skies. After all, if we don't conserve the resource, then all these other great opportunities we're talking about don't really matter. So tell us a little bit more about your best conservation and protection advice. Let's start with Aubrey.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a pretty extensive question. I'm trying to think what would be my top advice. I guess I'll just reiterate, be comprehensive in your thinking. That generally leads to greater success when we think of things in a holistic manner. Sometimes we'll just bang the dark sky conservation drum and forget about, well, we need infrastructure, we need grocery stores, we need places for tourism workers to live, and we need to be able to diversify our economy and not just have everyone come in the summertime. So think bigger, I would say. And then also, I'll just go back to Tori. I know they worked with, I believe it's Capitol Reef is nearby. And if you can have a relationship, if you do have a park or public lands nearby, develop a relationship with them and work together. Light pollution is inherently a regional issue. So just working regionally, making connections, I think, is what I've seen folks do to be successful.
Wonderful. Crystal, any advice?
Yes. Help everyone you possibly can fall in love with the night sky, and then encourage them to do their part in their own homes and in their own communities to preserve it. It's that simple.
Excellent. And Flint?
My advice is to be intentional. Light pollution is really easy to cause, but it's also really easy to remediate and mitigate. We just by changing our lighting practices, we can, reverse that pollution. And again, back to my earlier point about let's be intentional about what we offer to folks. Even though the dark skies are this great natural resource, if we can be intentional about how we interact with them and how we educate folks on that, it really provides a unique opportunity for them to form a special relationship with the dark skies and with your particular area and business.
Marvelous. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your wisdom. Really appreciate it and appreciate everyone's engagement. I'm going to pass it over to India to do our final wrap-up tasks.
Thank you so much, Cassidy, and I'd like to echo what you said and thank the panelists so much for just all of your knowledge and expertise and pieces of advice as well. It's very helpful. And a huge thank you to everyone in the chat. There's definitely been some great conversations, great questions. Like I said in the chat, that's all information I can send out in the follow-up. And of course, we have an opportunity drawing for an outdoor prize from a local company. So thank you for adding questions. And the winner is Julie McKee. Julie, if you would stay on for just a couple of minutes after everyone's getting off, then I'll make sure and get your email address and follow up with you. And with that, I just want to say thank you all so much for spending your morning with us on this virtual webinar. Look for the follow-up email, and we appreciate everyone's time so much. Thank you.